Today is the day we find out if Kansas State can lock down the biggest recruit in the history of the program.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh. You can find me on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. And if you're joining on this one, welcome and to being an OG. Welcome to the first episode of Locked On Kansas State. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So be sure to check out FanDuel.com today. We got an excellent episode for you today, and we got to start off with what's happening today. National Signing Day is here for Kansas State and for all of college football. And all eyes will be on Goodland High School at 12:30 today, as Kansas State's top commitment will sign his paperwork and officially commit to a school on National Signing Day today. Will it be the Wildcats or will he head out west? I'm talking about Linkon Cure here. Top tight end in the country, one of the biggest recruits in the state of Kansas, and he is currently committed to Kansas State. He was this summer, but some rumblings have happened over the past few weeks. The Oregon Ducks have certainly been in the fold after hosting him this past weekend on another visit. Another one, not just his official visit, it's a second visit as well. He actually tried to get out to Oregon a few weeks ago. Weather got in the way, but he went out there, and from the reports, it sounds like he is very excited. He really loved his visit out there. So it's going to be really interesting to see what we get from Linkon Cure this afternoon. Some recruiting experts have put a prediction for him to flip to the Ducks on 3. One of them, one of the biggest recruiting things, is showing him as a potential flip. Now, I will say that the confidence level on that is about a 55%. So if you want to call that clickbait, sure, fine. But it seems like it's a pretty even split right now between, will he go to Kansas State, will he stay put, or will he go to the Oregon Ducks with the Big Ten? I almost said Pac-12, but they're out west, but they're with the Big Ten now. So if that's the case, the biggest K-State commit, if he leaves to go to Oregon, the biggest K-State commit in the program's history will not come to Manhattan after all. Although many think that this could go either way, and I'm right in that boat as well. I've been up all night digging through social media. I went through all the K-State message boards, and really no one seems to have a good grasp on what's going to happen this afternoon. It seems like he shut off all communications with media, which is normal. It's not something that is just unlikely or just something in this situation when you're trying to make that decision and you're within just a couple hours of signing that paperwork. I'm hopeful this afternoon that he will stay true to his commitment this summer, and I do think that it would be good and benefit for him moving forward for 2025 and beyond in this program. And I'll go over a couple of reasons why I do think that he would be a perfect fit for Kansas State. Now, if you're listening to this show, you're probably a Kansas State Wildcats fan, so I probably don't need to remind you, but it's always going to be very good to listen to different thoughts on this one. But first, I think you have to think that he knows how huge of an impact he would be for the Wildcats if he did stay home. And not only on the field, but off the field as well. That whole hometown or home state, if you will, that whole home state hero, that's got to have a real pull. And at least I think so. I think it's got to have a real big pull on why you'd want to stay. You can really make an impact in your community, and people are going to remember you. And I do think that's something that he has to keep into consideration. It does seem like he's also created some really good relationships during his recruitment with the staff and players, and some that really matter the most too. Some really that bring up is head coach Chris Kleiman and quarterback Avery Johnson, just for starts. They seems like there's been really good relationships there. There's some talks that Avery Johnson has really turned on the throttle, pushed the pedal to the metal, if you will, after his Oregon visit to try and get Linkon Cure to stay and keep with his commitment. So hopefully that's the case. And if that relationship is as good as we think it is, then that's going to be a big impact, a big influence for keeping Cure with his commitment. Now, the depth chart, that's another big reason why you'd want to keep Cure and why Cure would want to actually stay with Kansas State. And between the two programs at the position, when you're looking at Oregon and when you're looking at Kansas State, Oregon's already has another tight end, a 4-star, according to On3, committed to sign this year. And then they just got a commitment for a 5-star, the best tight end in the 2026 class. And that doesn't really leave much growth for Linkon Cure at that position at Oregon. So hear me out here. Now, if this is one of his schools that he was wishing to go to at one point, I know there's some people that were reporting that he liked to play Madden with Oregon when he was growing up. And don't get me wrong, who didn't? Those uniforms are great. And I know that's a whole different conversation. I'm sure we'll get down the line while we're here about the uniforms of Kansas State. But it sounds like he will be expected to perform right away at Oregon. Now, obviously, if you're a top 5-star, 4-star fringe to 5-star recruit like Cure is, you're going to think that's the case. But when you're brand new at this level of football, talking Power 4 conference football here, going from high school straight to Power 4, it is a very tough ask to ask a freshman to make a huge impact, especially at an explosive offense like Oregon as well. And if you're asking to perform right away, but you already have other options available, you're basically saying that if he cannot perform right at this moment, you're possibly going to be forced to enter the portal next season because you might get pushed to the side very quickly. Now, I'm not saying that he can't be the top guy at Oregon, even if they have another top star recruit this season in the class and that one coming in 2026. That guy's going to play 2 sports, basketball and football. But I absolutely do think he can be the top guy at Oregon. I do. But I do think that's a ton of pressure. And it feels like the Ducks are already putting in some fail safes just in case that doesn't work out. Does that give you warm and fuzzies if you're trying to, decide where you want home to be for the next 3-4 years? Now, I know in this new world, the transfer portal, it could just be a 1-year and move on. But if you're trying to get a good chemistry and develop, and obviously the end goal is probably to make it to the league, do you think that's the right decision? He's definitely got some things to think about in this one. And on the other side, on K-State's side of things, he'll have plenty of opportunities to play the tight end position. There's some seniors moving on, and not only will he have some time to play, he doesn't actually have to be the dude, if you will. He's going to have plenty of time to get snaps. He's going to get plenty of time to get catches and targets. But Coach Kleiman and the rest of the staff can ease him into that transition to playing that Power 4 conference football because they have the luxury of having Garrett Oakley still on the roster. And what he's done this year has been fantastic. It's been really nice to see what he has done for the team. And regardless of, what happens in this one, we're going to have you covered here on Locked On Kansas State. Once the decision's made, we're going to have another video. I'm going to have a reaction on what happens when he commits or if he flips. Hopefully it's a commitment. Don't get me wrong. And we'll see what happens. I do hope it goes in the Wildcats' favor. There's no doubt about that. The biggest recruit in program history, if he signs, great things could come for Linkon Cure if he sticks with Kansas State. I truly believe that. And I can picture him being on the sidelines in the lineup, scoring in the end zone, because that's what tight ends do in Kansas State, right? The offense might have had some questions or concerns this year, especially towards the end. And, there's definitely some reasons for those offensive concerns. There's no doubt about that. But one thing always seemed to stay true this entire season is that they fed their tight ends. The Kansas State offense took care of their tight ends. And if you're a guy like Linkon Cure, you got to think that's something that you got to really hang your hat on, knowing that you're going to be one of those guys in 2025. Next, I really got to talk about something here. After the college football rankings just came out, the Big 12 got screwed again. Are you surprised? I'm not surprised, but I'm pretty angry about it. Now, should the Big 12 listen to an idea that Coach Kleiman gave to the media regarding its conference schedule just about a week ago? Should they actually start bringing back that conversation and think a little farther? We'll dive into that next here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, I want to tell you about our friends at Better Together. Have you ever started working on fantasy football and just started giving up on the season because your team was 0-8, 0-9, or maybe like me, 2-10 after a week? Well, if you've hated the team you've drafted in a season long of fantasy, but you still want to stay in the action, Welcome to Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs. You can get your talent, you can play with your friends, not against them. You can either pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join your social daily fantasy movement at Better Together. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code Locked On. That's all caps, Locked On, one word, for a chance to play in a contest with me or against me, because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast for the Kansas State Wildcats. And we are just getting started here. If you are listening, to the first show of the Locked On Kansas State podcast. So please be sure to give us a like, comment, subscribe, drop a comment down below saying you're an OG because you are listening to the first episode. Would love to have that here and welcome you. We will be dropping new episodes at least once a day, Monday through Friday. We're going to have live reaction shows for football games, basketball games, you name it. We're going to have a lot of content here for you if you're a Kansas State Wildcats fan. So I hope you become an everydayer and join us here on Locked On Kansas State. As I mentioned, heading into this segment here, the Big 12 college football rankings came out. They were not good. They were not favorable for the Big 12. And I guess I'm not surprised because we kind of heard about it. We heard that this was going to happen. We talked about the fact that there's this SEC and Big Ten bias, and it showed right there. Now, the whole 9 conference, the teams of the Big 12 playing 9 conference games seems to be hurting and impacting the teams. Now, the Kansas State is not involved in the college football rankings. They actually are 29th in the AP poll. They did receive votes. If you do the technicalities and count it out, they finished 29th. And after losing to Iowa State, I don't really blame them for not being the top 25. That's actually a pretty fair spot for where they're at, where they sit in the conference standings. Yes, they did start the season 7-1, but they did fall and end the season and not a great chance. But when you're looking at the rest of the conference, because you have to look at the conference as a whole, because when you're thinking about this college football playoffs, not only are you battling for yourself or vetting for yourself, you have to vet as a conference as well. And what we're seeing is Arizona State and Iowa State. Those are the 2 teams battling for the Big 12 Conference Championship. One of those teams will be a guaranteed spot in the college football playoffs, that 12-team new playoff format. They are currently ranked 15th and 16th in the college football playoffs. These are 10-2 teams, and they are outside looking in of the college football playoffs. Now, because of that, one of them will be a guaranteed win. One of those teams, which actually currently the Miami Hurricanes, sitting at the 12th spot, will be bounced out. BYU. BYU is 10-2. They're at 18th in the country, according to the college football rankings. 10-2. Wins have to matter. And the reason that wins are not mattering, according to the committee of the college football playoffs, well, it looks like there's a couple SEC teams ahead of them. There's a really heavy SEC bias right now. Alabama sits at number 11 in the rankings, 9-3. After losing to Oklahoma, after losing to Vanderbilt, sitting at 9-3. Ole Miss sits at 13 and South Carolina sits at 14, both of them 9-3. All 3 of those teams sit in front of every single Big 12 team in the college football playoff rankings. Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, all 10-2, all behind 3 loss SEC teams. To round out the rest of the Big 12 in the top 25, Colorado, who's 9-3, is ranked 23rd. Why aren't the SEC teams kind of towards the back like Colorado? Now, I am not stating that Colorado should be up with Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. Because if you looked at strength of schedule, if you looked at the losses that Colorado had, they do deserve to be below them. But that parity that they talk about and how this was supposed to happen for this college football playoffs is not happening. It's not there. We should see at least Arizona State and Iowa State, the teams that are battling for their conference championship, above them, and we're not seeing that. Now we have this whole new conversation that a 2-loss team like BYU is not even being considered for the 12-team playoff, but instead a 3-loss team that didn't make their conference championship, like Alabama, has a secured spot at number 11. It's just unreal. I just don't understand it. Now we're getting to a spot, and Chris Kleiman, Coach Kleiman, put out a statement. He was talking about it in a press conference last week and how he feels like people think that the Big 12 is a terrible conference because of how it looks and how people they're beating each other up. Really, these nine games in a conference, and it's beating each other up. It's almost like they're kicking each other down, beating a dead horse, if you will. He came up with a good idea that says that they should move to 8-game conferences like the SEC, because obviously it's working well for them. So why wouldn't they do that? An 8-team conference schedule, or stay with 9, but only play either FCS or a group of 5 teams in non-conference to boost up that easy schedule to get some more wins under their belt, because obviously strength of schedule isn't becoming a big deal. It's not being a reason why they're really paying attention to. It's hard to disagree what Chris Kleiman's saying in this one, because the SEC is doing it, and look how it's benefited them. I mean, they had one of their teams played Mercer, I believe, in week 11. It's just, how would you let that happen, right? It's just not an interesting way to make this happen. And I think that it's not fair, for one, and the disrespect for the Big 12 is just absolutely unreal. When you think expanding the playoffs would mean more parity and see more fairness in the game of college football, they've already found a way to get that bias for the SEC and the Big 10. I am a Big 12 believer. You are going to hear me on this show talk about how much I believe in Brett Yormark, how much I believe in this conference, and how much I believe in the Big 12. It's not looking the right way, according to this committee. I don't know what happens if it's money. What is the fact of why they're putting the SEC and the Big 10 ahead of Big 12 teams? But it's surely not the way that they should be ranking them, according to strength of schedule and of wins. That easy. 10-2 over 9-3. Just a simple eye test can tell you that team needs to be ranked over the other one. It's just absolutely insane. I don't get it, but we're going to see what happens moving forward. All right, next, we're going to wrap up today's episode with a look into where the Wildcats might be playing their bowl game and why you should see and be excited, really, about that game, regardless of what happened over the last couple games of the regular season as we head into 2025. We're going to check that out right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, let me talk to you about FanDuel, because FanDuel is where you can get all the action, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 of bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbooks gives you everything you need to place live bets on college football, NFL, and more. College basketball is one of them as well. We got a Big East, Big 12 matchup coming up this Saturday between Kansas State and St. John's. If you think Jerome Tang can get his roster going, we got a lot to talk about with that team. They're underperforming right now, but they had a really interesting game just the other day. They broke a program record with most points scored. Can they carry that momentum into this weekend against St. John's? Can they do it? I think they have a really good shot. I'd be interested maybe throwing down some money if that line's pretty good. I'd check that out. So if you get a hunch in the middle of a game or beforehand, if you get a good line, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place that you place your live bets. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today, where you can start with $150 of bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Again, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make more with FanDuel. Wrapping up this episode of Locked On Kansas State, and we're going to talk about some bowl projections as we finish up this first episode and why you should still be excited about this game moving forward. I know it's been a tough time, and I know a lot of fans have already checked out on the season after starting 7-1 and then finishing the way that the Wildcats did, but there's still a lot to be excited for. There's still a lot to be excited for this team. There's a couple bowls that have been projected. There, it looks like there's about 5 where they think that Kansas State could go to, according to all the different sources across the internet. You've got Action Network, USA Today, and 24/7. All of them believe that they're going to head to Memphis, Tennessee to participate in the Liberty Bowl. Now, all the different websites have a different SEC opponent. Talked about in that second segment how the bias of the SEC versus the Big 12 and how it's not fair. What a perfect time to get that taken care of, right? A Big 12 team taking care of an SEC squad. I mean, I'd be okay with that. This is why actually I'm hoping for the Liberty Bowl for Kansas State in Memphis, Tennessee, so they can take on an SEC opponent. According to Action Network, they think they'll take on the Texas A&M Aggies. USA Today thinks the Oklahoma Sooners, and 24/7 Sports thinks the Vanderbilt Commodores. I'm okay for any of those. That sounds pretty fun. So let's see if the Liberty Bowl could be the case. ESPN has a couple different ones that came out. One of them is the Armed Forces Bowl. That's in Fort Worth, Texas. And they think that it'll be Kansas State versus Army. Would be an interesting game. Huge love Army, love what Jeff Monken's doing over there. So you got to really like that one. And then the First Responders Bowl, also in Texas. That one's in Dallas. This would be the only game. Well, Army's also one, I guess, as well. But this would also be a game against a group of 5 opponent. And they project this one against Marshall. So again, you got the Armed Forces Bowl, First Responder Bowl in Texas. And then finally, Sporting News said the LA Bowl versus UNLV, which would mean that they would lose the Mountain West Conference Championship this week coming up against Boise State. That's actually at SoFi Stadium, the home of the Los Angeles Chargers. So that could be a fun one, playing in a professional stadium. But here's some reasons. So first off, I think it'd be really fun if they went to the Liberty Bowl. That's where I would hope to go, because you can get a chance to beat an SEC team heading into the offseason. What better momentum after all of this ranking crap that we've talked about in that second segment, and what we're going to see arguably for the rest of the season, regardless of the conference championships, what we're getting with this bias. It'd be fun to be able to play that. And the fact that Kansas State's not in that conversation, they can at least be in some sort of conversation of Big 12 versus SEC heading into the offseason. But there's a few reasons why you should still be excited for this game. First, I think you have to point right at the quarterback. I think when you're talking about a team, the easiest thing to talk about is the quarterback position and Avery Johnson. What a better time to fine-tune Avery Johnson than at a bowl game. We saw him do very well in the Pop-Tarts Bowl last year, right? Because have him do it again. That sounds fun. He can build more rapport with those wide receivers as well. There's some rumors talking about potential leaving in the transfer portal of Jace Brown. We don't know what's going to happen with Spivey as well. Will they stay? Will they go? If they stay, then that's a perfect time for them to get more reps and get ready for the offseason, help make more adjustments, set some more playing time for that. By the way, we're going to dig more into that wide receiver group and more portal talk on tomorrow's show. We're going to be loaded with portal talk tomorrow. You also get a chance to see some of the younger players against a likely Power 4 opponent, unless it's like Army or Marshall, like we referred to. And this could help address some of your needs from the portal heading into spring ball. You know, we're talking about a potential game towards the end of December, around Christmas time, right before New Year's. That's when the game's going to happen. The portal will be closed, but that doesn't mean that you can't go and grab people from the portal. That just means that people can't put their name in the portal anymore. There's going to be still plenty of people to bring in, get committed to move forward to 2025. This bowl game could help decide that, hey, maybe we need another tight end. Maybe we need another offensive lineman, something along those lines. You get a chance to see some of your young players and make a decision and see where your depth's at moving forward into 2025. Not just on the field matters as well, right? Connor Riley and his play calling. That's a big one. That's a huge one. Essentially a risk-free game to test out some things with the offense and see what could be more beneficial for this actual constructed roster moving forward. He was heavily criticized towards the end of the season, and honestly, for good reason. If he wants that to quiet down over the offseason, and you got to expect he wants that to happen heading into spring ball, he doesn't want to hear about or hear the fans talk about how dreadful the offense looked or the play calling need to be fixed or how he needs to get down at the sidelines and stay on the sidelines and focus on his offensive line portion more than the play calling side. I can go on, and I will this offseason, by the way, folks. It's just a strong performance in the bowl game would do wonders for him. It'll go a long way for the fans to get confidence in this Kansas State staff and so much more. So I think it's a huge thing for that to happen. So look at all these reasons why you should be excited for this bowl game. Don't check out yet. There's one more game. I know we're in the basketball season and the men's team's got some work to do. The women's team's looking real good. There's a lot to be excited for on the basketball side of the house, but there's still one more football game, and it's worth watching. So stay tuned. We're going to see what happens with this team. We got plenty more to talk about with the football this entire offseason. The portal's just getting started. We're going to talk more about National Signing Day as that happens today. Linkon Cure, we're going to see what happens. There's plenty of other signees that are coming in. Right now, there's 22 commitments. 20 of them are coming out of high school, a couple of junior colleges. There's so much to talk about with this Kansas State squad, and we're going to be here all steps of the way. So be sure to like and subscribe. It's going to be a really good time here at Locked On Kansas State, and I hope you join me for the ride. So again, please subscribe, please like the video, and until next time, this has been Locked On Kansas State.